All right, so welcome everyone. Our topic for today is going to be AI voice assistants. So we'll be talking about what they look like, how to use them, and some other interesting features that they have. So I want to mention that this series of presentations is sponsored by RBC, the Government of Ontario, the Government of Canada, and Entente Education, formerly Retired Teachers of Ontario. And so they make possible this series of presentations. So I'll go over some of the objectives that we have for the call today. So first, at the end, I hope you will all understand what exactly a voice assistant is, what they look like, what they're called, and in general, what they do. I also hope to tell you some common uses of them. So what the best uses are for voice assistants, such as reminders, calls, playing music, and asking questions, so that you can all make the best use of a voice assistant that you may have. I will present to you a couple different voice commands that you can use, so you hopefully have a toolbox ready at your disposal that you can use to interact with your voice assistants. And then we'll also talk about some basic safety and privacy tips when using these devices. So before I talk about voice assistants, I want to talk a little bit about AI. Now, we've talked about it in previous calls, but in case you weren't there or you don't remember some of those things, I'm just going to do a quick recap of it. So artificial intelligence, or AI, is a computer technology that allows computers to think and learn like people. So what this means is that they can understand language at a deeper level. They can understand sarcasm and implications. They can recognize patterns very well, and they can problem solve in very, very creative ways, much more creative than older computer programs. And AI learns to talk like a human by reading human-generated content online. So what AI does is it reads blogs, websites, news articles, all of this content that is on the internet. It uses this to learn about what language sounds like and how people talk, so that it can then replicate this in its interactions with you. Now, the reason I bring AI up is because AI and voice assistants are very, very strongly linked. And so you can't really talk about one without mentioning the other. So voice assistants rely on AI to work, and they are themselves a type of artificial intelligence. So when I talk about AI, I'm talking about, or sorry, voice assistants, I'm talking about things like Siri, Alexa, or Google Assistant, which is Hey Google. And sorry if I've activated any of your devices in the background. But they use AI to recognize your voice, and they use it to answer questions and perform a variety of tasks. Even the voice that they use, so the way that they can talk to you, it's a computer generated voice. This is a type of AI on its own. And so these devices, when we think of AI, they're some of the most closely linked devices to AI. They rely on it heavily in its voice recognition abilities, in its voicing ability, so being able to talk, and also its integration with other devices. So one more thing I want everybody to know is that these devices can connect to and control a variety of smart devices. So there are devices called smart lights, smart plugs, and smart thermostats. When we say smart, what it means is that these devices can connect to the internet and be controlled from another device. So a smart light, for example, you can turn on and off from your phone. So you'll have a little menu and you can see that, you have whatever devices you have in your home, and you can flick them on or off from your phone. So you don't have to be at home to control them. So if you have a voice assistant, these devices can also control these devices. So you can tell one of your voice assistants to turn on or off the lights in a certain room, or adjust your thermostat to a certain temperature without having to be physically near it. And I can talk more about this afterwards if anybody has any questions. So we see that voice assistants are very, very great at supporting a variety of different aspects of daily life. The first part that I want to talk about is that they offer hands-free help. And so this, I think, is the most or the biggest benefit that they bring, and the reason that we want to talk about them to seniors specifically. So the main advantage of using a voice assistant is that you can control it just with your voice. It's totally hands-free. So if you are, for example, cooking something and your hands are dirty, You can ask your voice assistant for the next step in a recipe, or you can ask it to send a message to someone or add something to a grocery list if you've just remembered. I'm sure all of us can think of a time where our hands were busy or dirty, we couldn't get our phones, and we had just thought of, wanting to write something down or to perform a task. This is great because you can just ask your voice assistant to do something for you. So that's one of those everyday kind of convenience things. But also, more importantly, we see that voice assistants provide a lot of benefit in cases of injury or stroke when individuals aren't able to reach out for help. So the common example that I use is if you've fallen down, a voice assistant is a very great tool to get help. If you've had a fall and you don't have your phone on you and you aren't able to reach a phone, you can ask your voice assistant to place an emergency call. So this can really make a huge difference. So for someone who doesn't have a voice assistant, they would need to wait until help reaches them, or they would somehow have to reach their phone to make a call. This is not the case if you do have a voice assistant, because then in the case of you falling, you can ask it to place a call. Some voice assistants can call 911 directly. So you just give it the command to call 911 and it will do it. Others don't have that feature, but they can make a call to your emergency contact. So a spouse or a child who can then make the emergency call on your behalf. But the main idea here is that these can provide a lot of help in the case where your hands are somehow occupied or you aren't near a device like a phone or a computer. The other benefit that we see in voice assistants is their support for vision and dexterity challenges. So because they are mostly auditorily based, so you talk to the device and it gives you a verbal reply, this is a great tool for people who have low vision and struggle to see a lot of the small buttons on a screen, especially on a phone. So if you're somebody who does scheduling, for example, and you struggle to see things on a calendar, you can have your voice assistant read out your calendar for that day or your events for that day. And so you don't need to rely at all on being able to see those small elements. You just need to hear what it says. And also, if you have issues pressing buttons on a phone or a tablet due to dexterity concerns, if your hands shake or if you just aren't able to press those buttons, voice assistants are a good workaround to this, where any command that you do, you can do it by saying something. So both of these things are really, really amazing, amazing benefits for seniors. I think seniors are often hesitant to use these devices because it's not very common. We don't maybe know a lot of people who have one. And it also might seem sometimes quite trivial to us to have one. There's not a real need for it. But I think between these two things, they really make voice assistants almost essential to have, especially for those safety concerns in case of injury or limited mobility. Some more benefits. So those were the kind of the main two ones, but some other ways that voice assistants can benefit you. One is as a memory aid. So voice assistants can help you stay on track by setting reminders for a variety of things. If you have a daily reminder that you need, for example, to take medication, you can just ask it to remind you at a certain time each day to do something, and that reminder will go off at that same time every single day. This is very convenient for taking medications or for just any other routines that we have that we need to do every day, but we're still liable to forget to do them. You can also have your assistants remind you about certain appointments or daily tasks. So as I mentioned earlier, you can have a daily plan, and at the beginning of each day, you can ask your voice assistant to read out your tasks for the day. So if you've put in that you have certain appointments and there's certain things you want to get done, your assistant can read those out to you at the start of the day so that you know what things you have to get done that day. So this is a great tool for offloading a lot of the things that we have to remember. It's very difficult to keep in mind all of our appointments, especially if we have a lot of them in a certain period of time, or we have ones that are scheduled for very far in advance. You don't have to remember all that stuff. You can offload it onto your assistant. You can tell it the things you have to do, and it'll help you to remember those and prevent you from forgetting as many things. Voice assistants also support independence and companionship. They can help you manage tasks on your own, but they can also be just someone you can kind of talk to. So they don't do it in a very rigid computer-like way. They don't just tell you what you have to do and what tasks you have. They can make jokes, they can play music, they can talk to you. So you can go to your voice assistant and ask it to, maybe tell you something fun that's happening in the city or in the community that day, or you can have it just ask you how you're doing. So it can just be someone you can talk to and have a little bit of light conversation with, especially if you're alone that day, and you just want to sort of have something to talk back and forth with. People often use it to tell them fun facts. So you can ask your voice assistant to tell you a couple fun facts about something, or to maybe give you some information about a hobby or something you're interested in. So it isn't just for task related or responsible stuff. You can also have voice assistants be kind of like a tech companion who can talk to you, and that's one of the big benefits to them. And that comes with a lot of those AI capabilities. So I want to talk about some specific assistants, and I'm going to talk about the big three. These are the ones I see the most often. So the first one is Siri. That's the name of this technology, and it runs on Apple devices. So if you have an iPhone or an iPad, you will likely have Siri enabled on it. And again, I don't want to wake anybody's technology up, but the wake word for this is hey, and then you say Siri. So you see those together, and then it activates, and it'll look something like the little picture there on your phone where it comes up. So it's not a physical device, it's a program on your phone or your iPad. The next one is Alexa, and that's made by Amazon. And the actual device is called an Echo. So when I say we're gonna give out Amazon Echo speakers at the end of the day, those are Alexas, and Alexa is the wake word for it. So just saying its name is enough to make it wake up. And these usually look like something like the picture on the right, where it's that little round thing that sits on a table, and it has a little ring of light around it that activates when you talk to it. And the last one is a Google Assistant. These run both on Android devices, so Samsung phones and other phones that run Android, but there are also physical devices like the Alexa. They're often round, and they have some sort of lights on them as well. And to activate those, you say hey and then Google. So you say those two words together, and that will activate it so that you can then ask it to do anything. One thing I want to mention while we're on this, and I think I might cover this in the privacy section too, but that these devices aren't recording, they're not really listening, they're just waiting for their wake words. Once they hear the wake word, they then start to record. But I think I'm going to cover this in more detail later. So I want to cover a couple example prompts, since sometimes it's hard to know where to start with one of these devices. So I want to go over some example ways that you can use them. So when talking about memory, as I mentioned, one great thing is saying, remind me to take my medication at 8 a.m., for example. So you can do this as a one-off. So if you just have one pill you need to take or a one-time pill, you can get it to tell you, tomorrow or in 2 days or in a week, whenever. Or you can have it set as a repeating reminder. So you can say, please remind me to take my medication every single day at 8 a.m. or 8 p.m. or whenever, multiple times a day. And it will keep giving you these notifications um, as often as you need, and it'll do it until you tell it to stop. So at a certain point, if you stop taking a certain medication, you can say, hey, that reminder I have for my medication, cancel it. I don't need it anymore. You can also ask it to remind you to make calls. So remind me to call the doctor tomorrow. Either you can give it a specific time or just at a certain point the next day, your voice assistant will remind you to make that call. When looking at communication, these assistants can help you to place calls. So you can say, call my daughter. And if you have somebody saved as, as your daughter in your phone, it'll call them, or you can say the name. So whatever the contact is there, it'll make that call. And so this can be used in emergency situations, but also in everyday communication. Or you can even ask certain devices to send messages. So you can send a text to someone, and you can tell it what you want it to text. So if you say send a message to John, I'll be there at 3, it will send a message to John with that text. Make sure you're referring to the right person. So the name that you use has to match the name that is saved in your contacts. So make sure you know what name you're using. These assistants can also help with organization, so they can help you structure your day and reduce mental load. If you're baking or you're cooking, you can have it set a timer. So you say set a timer for 10 minutes and it will start ringing and going off after that time. You can ask it to add appointments to your calendar. So if you have a specialist appointment booked 3 months from now, you can say, remind me about this appointment, and you can have it remind you the day before the appointment, but also a week in advance. So you can prep for it in any way that you need. And then you can also ask it what's on your schedule. So you can read out any sort of tasks you have for that day, or even important events for the next week if you want. And for independence, we see that these assistants can boost confidence and autonomy at home. So, as I mentioned, if you have those smart lights or any other smart devices, you can control them with just your voice without having to move to get to them, which is great if you have any sort of mobility limitations. So, you can have it turn off the lights, read you the weather, or just talk to you, talk about the news, tell you jokes, that sort of thing. One of the last few things I want to talk about is some privacy tips for using these things. I just want to mention that you have to remember that you are in control and you can always say no to features that you don't want. So these devices, you can turn them off at any time. You can avoid using them. You are totally in control of how to use and when to use these devices. So as I mentioned, devices are always listening for the wake word. So, your Alexa is waiting for you to say that word, and only when you say it is when it starts to record and actually really intensively listen to what you say. So there's a concern about the fact that these devices have a microphone that is essentially on all the time. So I just want to mention for everybody to know that they are listening just for the wake word, and then afterwards they are listening to whatever it is that you say. Now, if you are concerned about having a microphone on all the time, that's completely understandable. A lot of these devices will have a feature that you can turn the microphone off. So, for example, I'm not sure how it looks on an Alexa. I think there's like a little microphone off button. On Google Nest Hubs, there's a switch. There's a physical switch that you can flick off to turn the microphone off, and then you can turn it back on whenever you'd like. But when you do say the wake word, whatever it is, that's when the device starts to record, and it has to record your voice so that it can remember what it is that you asked and then give you the response. Um, and so as soon as you start talking, that information gets sent to the company's servers, so whatever computers they have, and that's where it gets processed and then becomes the audio output that you then hear from the device. So that's an important distinction I wanted to make. So the listening for the wake word versus actually recording your voice. So I already talked about this. A lot of the devices will have a mute button. If they don't, or if you can't find it, you can unplug the device. So just plug it out of the wall and plug it back in when you'd like the microphone to be on. And some devices may have a red light or a little color on the switch to confirm that it is on the off setting. Some devices you can review the history. This will be different for each device, but oftentimes your phone will have an app that connects to that assistant. In the settings of the app, you can then see what was recorded and you can delete your voice history at any time. Deleting your voice history deletes it just from your device. It doesn't delete the recording that the company has, so they may still retain it. So that's an important thing to keep in mind that once you talk to it, that it is kind of semi-permanent and that the company will always have access to that recording. When you're using these devices, I recommend always using a secure Wi-Fi network. So this is something that is password protected and where you know the people who are on it. So this is going to be a home network. Avoid using public or open Wi-Fi when setting these up, since those connections are not as secure and they can lead to certain security concerns. And a great way to find out what sort of privacy features and settings a device has is you just ask your assistant, how do you protect my privacy? And your device will explain all of those things to you. Okay, so just to wrap up, we have talked about voice assistants. So these are devices. They can be a program on your phone or a physical device that you can talk to that will then help you to perform certain tasks, give you answers, and reach out to other people. You can use these assistants to set reminders, to place calls, to play music, ask questions, have a conversation with, and even control smart devices around your house. We talked about a variety of different voice commands to use for these features. But if you'd like to know how to use devices, you can always ask the device itself, how can I use you? What can I do with you? And it'll give you some ideas. And then we talked about how to use these devices safely and to always keep privacy in mind when using them. That's all I have for today. I'm going to stop the recording here and then we can do our question period.